the percentage is actually 23.7%. In other words, nearly 1 of every 4 workers is functionally unemployed in America today. Hardly something to celebrate. Most Americans don't earn enough to afford basic costs of living analysis finds. The bottom 60% of U.S. households, we are now considering 60% of U.S. households, the bottom, cannot afford to meet a minimal quality of life.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's Ashley Bishop with Status Coup. Don't pay any attention to the slew of really quite terrible economic indicators that went underreported in the media last week. The US has the greatest economy in the world. How do I know this? Well, Trump keeps telling us all that the US has the greatest economy in the world. Here he is just last week at the Saudi-US Investment Forum, telling us exactly this.
And most importantly for the people in this room, the days of economic misery under the last administration are rapidly giving way to the greatest economy in the history of the world. We are rocking. The United States is the hottest country, with the exception of your country, I have to say, right? I'm not going to take that on. No, Mohammed, I'm not going to take that on. Wouldn't that be a terrible thing if I made that full statement? But I will not do it. You're hotter. At least as long as I'm up here, you're hotter. But groceries, gasoline, energy, and all other prices are down with no inflation. We have no inflation, and in a few short weeks, we've created 464,000 brand new jobs. Think of that. It's almost 500,000 jobs created just in a matter of weeks.
So there is Trump sounding quite sedated, saying that aside from Saudi Arabia, who is apparently hotter than the US, we are, as he says, rockin'. And in an earlier part of this video that I am not going to torture you with, Trump also said military enlistment is up because people are just feeling so prideful, so good about the US. Though, as I'm sure you might guess, military enlistment tends to go up during periods of economic downturns and uncertainty, not when people are feeling good about their future prospects. And it's not just Trump. Here is Joe Biden, who we found out yesterday has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. Here he is 2 years ago, also telling us how well the economy is doing.
In recent days, there's been reason to think that this country is moving backward, that freedom is being reduced, that rights we assumed were protected are no longer. A reminder that we remain in an ongoing battle for the soul of America, as we have for over 200 years. And for all the challenges, America has the strongest economy in the world. More people working and starting businesses, more young people graduating from high school and college than ever before.
So again, despite the battle for the soul of America, remember that? The US economy is doing great. America has the strongest economy in the world. It was doing so great that the Democrats lost the election. That's how that works, right? When the economy is doing great and everyone is happy and well-fed and able to pay their bills and rent is affordable, and there aren't historic levels of wealth inequality, we vote for hateful, racist dictators, right? That's, I think, how all of that works. Or maybe the economy has been trashed for a long time and has only been working for a select few for, again, a long time. Politico wrote a great piece that I've referenced before about the disparity between what the numbers have said about how our economy is functioning and how it's actually functioning for working people following the election. So here is this piece from Politico. Voters were right about the economy. The data was wrong. So before the presidential election, many Democrats were puzzled by the seeming disconnect between economic reality as reflected in various government statistics and the public's perceptions of the economy on the ground. Many in Washington bristled at the public's failure to register how strong the economy really was. They charged that right-wing echo chambers were conning voters into believing entirely preposterous narratives about America's decline. What they rarely considered was whether something else might be responsible for the disconnect, whether, for instance, government statistics were fundamentally flawed. What if the numbers supporting the case for broad-based prosperity were themselves misrepresentations? What if, in fact, darker assessments of the economy were more authentically tethered to reality? And they looked into this. So after they looked into this, What they uncovered shocked them. The bottom line is that for 20 years or more, including the months prior to the election, voter perception was more reflective of reality than the incumbent statistics. Our research revealed that the data collected by the various agencies is largely accurate. Moreover, the people staffing those agencies are talented and well-intentioned, but the filters used to compute the headline statistics are flawed. As a result, they paint a much rosier picture of reality than bears out on the ground. Take as a particularly egregious example what is perhaps the most widely reported economic indicator, unemployment. Known to experts as the U3, the number misleads in several ways. First, it counts as unemployed the millions of people who are unwillingly underemployed. That is, people who, for example, work only a few hours each week while searching for a full-time job. Second, it does not take into account many Americans who have been so discouraged that they are no longer trying to get a job. Finally, the prevailing statistic does not account for the meagerness of any individual's income. Thus, you could be homeless on the streets, making an intermittent income and functionally incapable of keeping your family fed, and the government would still count you as employed. I don't believe those who went into the past election taking pride in the unemployment numbers understood that the near record low unemployment figures, the figure was a mere 4.2% in November, counted homeless people doing occasional work as employed. But the implications are powerful. If you filter the statistic to include as unemployed people who can't find anything but part-time work or who make a poverty wage, roughly $25,000 a year, the percentage is actually 23.7%. In other words, nearly 1 of every 4 workers is functionally unemployed in America today. Hardly something to celebrate. Yes, nearly 24% functional unemployment is hardly something to celebrate. And despite Trump's, let's call them efficiency and cost-cutting measures, which has included his laying off federal workers and causing a mass layoff event in the private sector because of his tariffs, and the economic instability that has followed, somehow the economy is doing worse. So as I started out this video, several really bad economic indicators flew under the radar this past week. Here is the first of which. Most Americans don't earn enough to afford basic costs of living analysis finds. So the gap between what Americans earn and how much they need to bring in to achieve a basic standard of living is growing, according to a new report. The analysis from the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity looks beyond whether people can afford daily necessities like food and shelter to consider whether they have the means to pay for things like the technology tools necessary for their jobs, higher education, and health and childcare. LISEP tracks costs associated with what the research firm calls a basket of American dream essentials. The group says its minimal quality of life index provides a truer picture of how Americans are failing than standard economic data, such as the nation's gross domestic product and jobless rate. The index captures the annual change in the typical cost facing low and moderate income households who are looking to maintain a basic quality of life. So all of the things that working people have been saying that they can't afford that are also essential to living a life. So let's go on. We analyze these components not just in terms of financial figures, but as crucial elements that shape a family's capability to achieve a desirable standard of living. The group explains in a paper describing its approach. The findings. For the bottom 60% of U.S. households, a minimal quality of life is out of reach, according to the group, a research organization focused on improving lower earners' economic well-being. So let's just take a second to digest that, because when people are dealing with statistics, it's easy to lose sight of what we're really talking about, which is people and their ability to meet their basic needs without struggling. Again, basic needs. The bottom 60% of U.S. households, we are now considering 60% of U.S. households, the bottom, cannot afford to meet a minimal quality of life. Let's do some quick math here and assume that it's close enough to being correct. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, there are about 131.4 million households in the US as of 2022. That means that when they say the bottom 60%, they're referring to roughly 79 million households. So 79 million households in the US, the wealthiest country in the world with the greatest economy, as they keep telling us, 79 million households cannot reach a minimal quality of life. That is insane. The piece goes on to say, the middle class has been declining. We just haven't recognized it fully. LISEP chairman Gene Ludwig told CBS Money Watch, "It's really dangerous because it's the kind of thing that leads to social unrest, and it's not fair. The American dream is not that it's given to you, it's that if you work hard, you have a chance to get ahead and achieve the things in life that you want to achieve. It's not living in a tent, not having to steal." The Ludwig Institute also says that the nation's official unemployment rate of 4.2% greatly understates the level of economic distress around the U.S., factoring in workers who are stuck in poverty wage jobs and people who are unable to find full employment. The U.S. jobless rate now tops 24%, just like the Political piece said, according to LISEP, which defines these groups as functionally unemployed. So again, 24% of Americans are functionally unemployed, in agreement with this piece from Politico. Peering beneath the surface, by those standards, the lowest earning Americans around the US are falling well short of what they need to maintain a decent standard of living, according to LISEP. Those households, which in 2023 earned an average of $38,000 per year, would need to make $67,000 a year to afford the items the group tracks as part of its index, which also includes the cost of professional clothing and basic leisure activities. Traditional headline economic indicators like GDP and unemployment tell us the economy is thriving, but they don't reflect the lived reality of most Americans, Ludwig said in a statement. Americans are working harder than ever, fueling our economic growth, but the benefits of that hard work are not being distributed in a way that supports upward mobility for too many middle and low-income Americans. From 2001 to 2023, the cost of affording what amounts to a basic level of economic security doubled. According to LISEP's analysis, housing and healthcare costs surged, while the amount of savings required to attend an in-state public university soared 122%. Meanwhile, median earnings for the bottom 60% of income earners fell 4% over that span when adjusting for the cost of goods, tracked by the group's index according to LISEP. Income growth for these households has also lagged, rising 0.37% per year during that same period, less than half as much for the top 40% of earners, the group found. Put another way, only 40% of American households can afford a minimal quality of life. 40%. And the bottom 60% would need to make roughly double what they make already to get there. $38,000 a year for one household is nothing. And I'm sure hearing this is not a surprise to most people watching this because we are living it and we know. It's only our elected representatives, wealthy elites, and the media who seem to need a study to tell them that working people are struggling. And you would think that this would be making headlines across all of corporate media. And I haven't gotten to the other indicators of economic woe for working people just yet. And you would be wrong. Obviously, I am reading this from a CBS piece who covered this, so they get credit for that. But given the gravity of what this piece says, we should be talking about nothing else. Remember, this is a piece also tracking economic trends over the last 20-something years. And we know this loss of quality of life for working people has been going on for decades longer than this study even includes. Media has had decades to do its job and take an honest, holistic appraisal of where we are as a country, where we are for working people, not where the richest among us are. But your corporate media pundits are right there at the top. So they are largely insulated from the precarity that at least 60% of us are living. And it gets worse from there. This is from Unusual Whales. A U.S. household now needs to earn $114,000 annually to afford a median-priced home. That's up 70% from $67,000 just 6 years ago. So again, 70% more today than it did 6 years ago to comfortably afford a median-priced home. U.S. households need to earn $114,000 annually to afford a median-priced home, a staggering 70% increase from the 67,000% needed just 6 years ago. While affordability has clearly eroded, there are emerging signs that the tide may be turning slightly in buyers' favor. Inventory is growing, more sellers are reducing prices, and buyers are starting to gain more leverage in the housing market. Look, if you are making $38,000 a year or less, so again, 60% of us, you are not going to be able to afford a house under any market conditions. And even if you can, if you are one of the lucky 40% of households, will you be able to actually hold on to the house once you've bought it? And there is a good chance that the answer to that question is a resounding no. So here is a post from Newswire. U.S. foreclosure filings rose nearly 14% in April compared to a year earlier. Adam, which provides nationwide property data, released its April 2025 U.S. foreclosure market report this week, collecting foreclosure filings from more than 3,000 counties across the U.S. There were a total of 36,033 foreclosed properties in April, including default notices, scheduled auctions, and bank repossessions. This was a nearly 14% increase from last year. 14% since last year. It's almost as though mass layoffs and tariffs and student debt and medical debt and low wages and a high cost of living make it difficult to hold on to a home if you are lucky enough to even be able to purchase one to begin with. Meanwhile, this is from Oxfam. So billionaire wealth surges 3 times faster in 2024, world now on track for at least 5 trillionaires within a decade. Global billionaire wealth grew by $2 trillion in 2024, 3 times faster than the year before, equivalent to roughly $5.7 billion a day. The world is now on track to see 5 trillionaires within a decade, the latest annual Oxfam inequality report reveals today. Meanwhile, according to the World Bank, the number of people still living in poverty, around 3.5 billion, has barely changed since 1990. It warns that progress on poverty reduction has slowed to a standstill and that extreme poverty could be ended 3 times faster if inequality were to be reduced. In 2024, the number of billionaires rose to 2,769, up from 2,565 in 2023. Their combined wealth surged from 13 trillion to 15 trillion in just 12 months. This is the second largest annual increase in billionaire wealth since records began. The wealth of the world's 10 richest men grew on average by almost $100 million a day. And even if they lost 99% of their wealth overnight, they would remain billionaires. Soon enough, Bernie will have moved on to talking about the billionaires and trillionaires. Meanwhile, working people are surviving by the skin of their teeth. Like I have said elsewhere, many times, this is why the Democrats lost. I don't know how many other times and other ways to say it. It wasn't messaging. It was a lack of material action. This is why our biggest voting bloc is actually disaffected people who do not vote. In our last election, 36% of eligible voters did not vote. That's roughly 90 million people who did not vote. Why vote when cycle after cycle, no matter which party is sitting in office, you see your life get worse and worse? Why bother? Why take the time off of work to participate in democracy when this is what democracy seems to be giving you? For 60% of us, it is precarity and struggle. And I have spoken to a lot of people at protests and rallies, and some of those people voted for Trump. They believed the lies that really our problem is just immigrants getting benefits like Social Security or Medicaid to the exclusion of hardworking Americans, or it's DEI or lazy federal workers sucking up all of taxpayer money, or people who simply refuse to pay their student debt that they took out a loan after all. They were, 18, hardly understood what that meant, but they took it out, so they should pay it back. Or it's unions like the International Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers who work on the New Jersey Transit, who were just on strike and told me they are just trying to get within the ballpark of wages that engineers who work across the platform from them doing the same job make. The people who believe that those culture war issues are the real problem are desperate and struggling. Sure, some of them are just racist and can't be helped, but that's not half of this country. Desperate people will do desperate things and are vulnerable to believing whatever they need to make it make sense to them. Their suffering is real. The conclusions that they have reached are wrong. And they are vulnerable to the lies of people like Donald Trump when they say, I understand your suffering and I can tell you why. It's that guy over there. He's to blame. The immigrant family down the street who work a pittance doing the jobs that keep our country running, they're getting your benefits. They're getting your jobs. They are stealing your American dream. And it's not. We all know the real thieves who have stolen our American dream is the ownership class. Like thieves in the night, they have made extinct the American middle class through neoliberal policy that has privatized the gains of the last 40 years and saddled us all with the burden of their failures, like they did during the recession, during the pandemic, and on and on. And for some added context, during the first Gilded Age in 1890, the wealthiest 1% of Americans controlled 51% of the nation's wealth, while the bottom 44% held just 1.1%. John D. Rockefeller's wealth alone represented 1.5% of the total GDP of the US economy during that time, which would be approximately $447 billion now. From 1980 to 2023, wealth inequality has risen to heights not seen since then, since the first Gilded Age. As of 2024, the elite 1%, as Bernie has been telling us forever, they control nearly a third of the nation's wealth, while the top 10% hold approximately 67%. The bottom half of working people just barely grasp onto 2.5%. By the end of 2024, 21st century robber baron Elon Musk had a peak net worth of $486 billion, which was about 1.6% of the total US GDP. Though by March, his wealth had dropped to a, pittance, $330 billion, he still remains the richest man in the world. We are living in the second Gilded Age where 60% of US households cannot meet a minimum quality of life. This is the creation of both parties, and the blame for Trump lies with their collective inability to allow for the conditions for working people to meet their basic needs. And if we had an honest media, we would be talking about nothing but how the elite class siphoned up all opportunity and wealth and resources for themselves and left us working people with strife, division, precarity, and little else. But we don't. So instead, we get a lot of this.
This is the best, they say, 100-day start of any president in history. My taxation and tariff policies, which are policies of common sense, we get along with China. They want to make a deal, that it's going to be a fair deal. I have a Fed person who's not really doing a good job, but I won't say that. I want to be very nice. I know much more than he does about interest rates, believe me. In the coming weeks and months, we will pass the largest tax cuts in American history. Our golden age has only just begun.
Trump's golden age, which will include only more suffering for working people while the rich continue to take everything that they can. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, follow, and subscribe to Status Coup and join us at statuscoup.com/join so we can do the reporting that corporate media covers up. Bye.